The layout component has been adjusted. What about withErrorHandler? Now, withErrorHandler is a higher order component that returns a class-based component. And I want to convert this class-based component. So here I'll just return an anonymous functional component, so a function that receives props and will in the end return JSX. So get rid of that render method here and of one closing curly brace down there. And now in here, we're also using component willMount and willUnmount. And we're also using state. This will all not work in our functional component. So for the state, we'll need to use the useState hook. And for a component willMount and component willUnmount, we'll have to use the useEffect hook. Now let's start with the state. This manages our error and it starts with null here. So let's actually use state here and pass in null. And let's extract error and set error here. Now for component willUnmount, we can't use useEffect because that will always run after the render cycle and we want to execute this code before we render our content. Well, what could be the solution here? It's actually straightforward. Since you want to execute that code before your JSX code gets rendered, well, you just can remove component willUnmount and you're done. Because our JSX code gets rendered down there, this code runs up here, it does run before the JSX code is reached. Now the only thing I want to change is the request interceptor here. I'll store this in a constant and not in some property of our class, which we don't have here. And the rest can almost stay the same, but of course here, where I want to set error to null, I will call setError and set this to null. And here, where I want to set it to the error object I'm getting, I'll call setError and pass in that error object. Now to avoid naming clashes here and confusion, I'll rename this argument I get here to just error, and I will set error here in setError. Now for component willUnmount, we can use useEffect. We can use useEffect because in the function we pass into this, if we return a function there, that will be our cleanup function. So we can pass our cleanup work into this return function there and remove one curly brace. Now there is one important thing though. If you want to run this on unmounting, you have to pass a second argument to useEffect, which is this empty array of elements. Because again, React will check all the elements you pass here, and only when they change, when their values change, it will rerun your useEffect function and also your useEffect cleanup function here. Now, if you pass an empty array, these will never change, and therefore React will run your main function content when the component mounts, and your cleanup function when it unmounts. But actually here, this would work, but we could also say that we want to rerun this effect and therefore clean up our interceptors whenever our request or response interceptor here changes. And there, by the way, you should remove the this keyword because I want to refer to my constants here, not to some class property we don't have anymore. Now, since we want to clean up when any of these two changes, we can also pass request interceptor and response interceptor as arguments or as elements here in this array to useEffect. And this is then a setup we can definitely use because this ensures that we clean this up whenever our interceptors change. Now for the error confirmed handler, I'll add const to make this a function inside of the functional component. And when I call setState to set the error to null, I will call setError and pass null. Now last but not least, down here in the JSX code, when I use this state error, I'll just use error in all these places because we do extract error up here from useState. So I'm using that down here now. And this will hold the error we set with setError in our place here. Now regarding the function I passed to modal closed, that is passed without this because it's now just a function in this function body. And for the props I passed to the wrapped component, well, these are passed without this because I'm not referring to a property of my class here, but to the props we're getting as an argument there. With that, we should have an error handler that works again. So let's actually try this. Now, to try that, I'm in Firebase here, and there for the rules where I fetch my ingredient data, I'll set read access to false. And this will therefore prevent us from reading our ingredients. And now when I reload, we indeed see that error modal, which I can dismiss. So this works as before, now with our functional component and the hooks. And of course, now we can also set this back to true so that we can load the ingredients again. Here we go.